It's this video from Wallflower, and it's over here, so I'm going to be able to look at it. Let me get it spaced out on the screen a little bit better here. This one is Noam Chomsky, The Youth and Mass Media's False Reality and History. Oh, it's a little bit off kilter here. And I'm a little big on screen, y'all. Okay. How's that? Yeah, that works for me. So this is Noam Chomsky, The Youth and Mass Media's False Reality and History. I have no idea what this is. I can kind of guess. What are some techniques for young people in the population to wake up from the mass media's false reality and false history? Now, let me just say this for the record. I have tons and tons and tons and tons of opinions on the whole false reality and mass media and how it affects people. And like I said, technology, stupidity kind of go hand in hand. On the flip side, I don't know what tack he's coming from, but I have tons of content and rants and whiny, complaining stuff where I talk about just how low we've gone and how ridiculous it is that people are just so caught up in anything that someone puts in front of them. People just believe. And why? For why? People don't question things anymore. People just are like, you just get this wild thing on social media and people just run with it. And they're like, oh my God, did you hear this? And it's like, it wasn't even true, but they don't care, anyway, I digress. This one is 7 minutes and some odd change long, 7:35. So I'm going to try not to talk as much as I usually do. Hold on. I actually am going to do this. You don't need to see that the whole time, Just try to be a little bit professional. Wild, right? Who knew? Okay. I guess it's giving us a minute to read this.
I think kids are ready for it. They just have to pay attention. Most people just don't pay attention, either because they think everything's hopeless. I mean, it's kind of driven into your heads that everything is hopeless. There's nothing you can do. The powers are too great, And in fact, the sense of hopelessness in the country is astonishing. So, for example, if you look at polls, over half the population thinks that Congress ought to be totally thrown out and replaced by your neighbors. They'll do a better job. Approval of Congress is in single digits. Nobody thinks I can do anything about it. It's like these peasants in Brazil. How can somebody like me do anything about it? In fact, you take a look at some of the, say the 9/11 movement, which is kind of interesting. Not the content, but just the phenomenon. The Bush blew up World Trade Center, that kind of thing. It appeals to, it has a sympathy, at least, of, I forget the numbers, I think it's about a third of the population, a huge part of the population. That means that a large part of the population is willing to accept the possibility that we're run by a bunch of homicidal maniacs who are trying to murder us all, but they don't think they can do anything about it. So I'll lift a
Right, I'm going to say something about that. What I'm going to say about that is that I can understand why people think, and the generalization of homicidal maniacs, I don't think it's quite that extreme. I think that it's run by people who they're playing a different game. So the normal population, just like when you have less money, you're like playing a different game than people that are they have a savings account and they have a backup plan and they have all of these things to fall back on. When you don't have a backup plan and you don't have a savings account and you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're playing a different game, right? And so some of the things that bother these people, they don't bother you because you don't have time to deal with that. You don't have time to put your effort into that. You have time to put your effort into what's getting you day to day, what's getting you paycheck to paycheck. These people aren't worried about paycheck to paycheck. So it's literally like a list. You cross that off of your concerns list, and instead you add, getting a higher education for your children, or starting a savings account, or getting a better car that's more efficient. So you have time and the wiggle room to kind of worry about things that are like, climate change and stuff. You have time. And then the higher up you get, your problems are different. You're playing different games, right? So we're not even on the same board as the people that are running things. And I'm talking about really running things. I'm not talking about the figureheads and the political, face of movements and things, because everyone knows. And if you don't, I don't know where you've been. Everyone knows that the people that are the face are generally not the brains. They are there because they have charisma and that people listen to them. They're not coming up with any of the stuff. They're playing an entirely different game on a different board. They're like in a different room than all of us. They have the money, they have the power, they understand how that world works. It does not work the way that the paycheck to paycheck or the virtual signaling, groups, or do I shop at JCPenney or do I go to like Louis Vuitton? Like they don't, that's so far beneath them. They have people that think about those things. They just exist, and all that matters is their legacies. Legacies are everything everybody ever wanted through history, and also the biggest downfall of most of the powers that be. Most of the reason that everybody does anything, and then you see these families pop up constantly, is legacy, because they are born into this world. They understand how the game is played, and it is not played with the same rules, and it's not played with the same pieces as all of us here. Okay. In my opinion, this is not from historical fact. I don't have any kind of reference. I'm just saying that's how I see things. So I'm not necessarily ruling out that they are homicidal maniacs. However, I think that in their game, in their rules, things like collateral damage are a part of how things work, and that they're moving on a massive scale and a long game scale versus how do I make it till tomorrow? I only have $20 in my account. That's normal for me. Do you know what I'm saying? So they're playing a different game completely. So I think that context needs to be included in this, which also, when you're, here's the thing. I knew I was going to rant about this. How many times have you guys heard me say, we need to focus on our neighbors, we need to focus on our community, our families, the people around us, because what's happening is that we are so exposed to all of these problems that have nothing to do with us, that hopelessness comes into play. How are you going to help somebody in the Andes Mountains or wherever, or in the Himalayas? How are you going to help the monks on the Himalayas because they need help? You can't. You're trying to get to your next paycheck. So now you've not only compounded all of your issues that are happening from your paycheck to paycheck and just trying to get food and groceries and take care of your kids and pay the water bill and the light bill. Now you're worried about the monks in the Himalayas. Why? It's none of your damn business, to be completely honest, because frankly, you're not in the tax bracket to worry about that shit. That's just how that works. I'm sorry. And I know people don't like that because it's like by reaching, you feel like you're going to touch the world. How about you touch your community? How about you take care of your family and yourself and your home, and then you worry about everything else? Like when you hit those levels and you lift your family up to a point where you can focus on these other levels of the game, then do so. But first, you got to get out of this, right? You got to get out of the muck. I haven't got out of the muck, but I'm trying. I'm doing my very, very best, right? I'm not worried about the monks in Himalayas, not because I have no heart, but because frankly, that's not going to help my family. Call it selfish, call it whichever you want. I just am saying that's the reason that people are so hopeless, is because they're concerned about things that have nothing to do with them and they can't help. They can't do anything about. It has nothing to do with them. It is none of their business, and they are all up in it because social media says so. Because some reporter reported on a Himalayan monk, and now all of a sudden Himalayan monks need help. And now I'm going to take time away from my family. I'm going to take time away from my job. I'm going to take time away from this. I'm going to go picket, spend money on supplies I don't have. And I'm going to send it all to the Himalayan monks because you know what? I want to feel better. Get a savings account. Guarantee you feel 10 times better. Just say it. Okay. Anyway, sorry. That was a tangent. I apologize. It's what I do. Okay. Sorry, sir. Let's keep going.
Do anything about it. So don't lift a finger to do anything. Okay, it's the way it is. We'll kind of hide in the corner and wait till it happens. But when people are kind of, some of the most effective kinds of propaganda are the kinds that allow you to see what's going on. So you see 99%, 1%, but to feel, I can't do anything about it. I'm isolated, alone. I don't talk to anybody. People like me can't do anything. We just have to suffer and bear it. That's really effective propaganda. That's the way. That's how slavery could last forever without many slavery rebellions. It's how women were oppressed. So like take, say, my grandmother's generation. If my grandmother had been asked if she's oppressed, she wouldn't have even known what you're talking about. That's life.
True.
You know, women are doormats. That's life. You get to my mother's generation, still plenty of oppression, but and she was bitter about it, but you didn't think you could do anything about it. By the time you get to today, it's quite different. It's very much like the peasants in Brazil or the indigenous people.
What have we done with it? That's all I want to say. That's the only thing I'm going to say about that. What have we done with it? With all of this progress that we've made to empower people, and what have we done with it? Created an OnlyFans empire, like have music now where we talk about the color of our body, our lady bits. Like super, super proud of us. Yay, go women! Yay.
It's very much like the peasants in Brazil or the indigenous people in Bolivia, or you know, the blacks in the South after the early days of the civil rights movement. Yeah, we can do something about it. Even if it's brutal and harsh and we might get killed, we can do something. You know? And it's that transition is very...
I spotted your comment. You said made progress and tipped things over to extreme stupidity. What do you do when you win? When you fight, and your whole world is about fighting for or fighting against, what happens when you win? What happens is you end up, you know, there's no fight. The war's over, right? You won. Now you get to do something good with it. Well, people are all wild up. They want to fight. So what do? They pick something else and they move on. They don't actually, you know, work on what it is that they fought for and won. They don't work on developing that and nurturing it and creating something wonderful. They move on to the next fight. It's all about the adrenaline and the selfishness of it, of yes, fighting, you know, it feels good to fight. Yes, let's fight for something else now. You see how many things that people are fighting for now? They go and they fight against or for or against or for or against or for, and they're like jumping between all of these different causes because they just want to fight because it's fun for them. I don't know. I just think that people are assholes. Sorry.
And I think when you get back to your question,
for
a lot of young people, I think it's, you know, it's called apathy, but I suspect it's more hopelessness, powerlessness. And people can learn you're not powerless. Just take a look at what's been done. Take a look at what other people have done under, you know, much harsher conditions.
What about excusism, right? I just made that word up. Excusism is the finding a reason to excuse your lack of behavior or like your laziness. Sure, you say hopelessness, there's nothing I can do that's been ingrained in people, but also people don't even freaking try. Why should they? Because there's an excuse sitting out there that's saying, look, you're not going to be able to anyway. And they're like, okay, cool. And they just give up. I mean, I don't know. I'm all about you got to do something for you. You got to stand behind if you want to do something, then freaking do it. If something's holding you back, then try anyway, or go a different tact. I'm not saying, you know, just because you go up to a door and you're like, dude, I need to get in there. I'm not talking about like Walmart when it's closed, but I'm saying like, oh, I don't know, this is out of order. I really got to pee. Get in the bathroom. Okay, well, find another way. Go to find another bathroom. Do something. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't just like stand there and pee your pants. Yes, weaponizing competence. That's a really good way to put it. Thank you. Okay, sorry. I know I keep interrupting. We're never going to get through this because I talk too much. Sorry.
You know, much harsher conditions than you'll ever face. And what's been done right here in your own country. The 60s really did civilize the country. I mean, it's a very different country from what it was in 1960.
True.
And it's mainly young people who just didn't give up. Didn't feel, okay, we can't do anything. Actually, sometimes it's kind of dramatic. Like for years, what's called McCarthyism, which did intimidate people tremendously. I remember I lived through it. And people were just scared out of their wits. They couldn't do anything. The House Un-American Activities Committee, if people were called, they just trembled in fear. What can you do? But in the 1960s, people like Abby Hoffman started just making fun of them. And they collapsed, you know. It's a very thin structure of power. I mean, as soon as you submit it to ridicule or you dismiss it, it can collapse. And this has been understood for centuries. So you go back to, say, David Hume, who was one of the great founders of classical liberalism and great philosopher. But he wrote a book that he called, I think it was called The Foundations of the Theory of Government or something like that. And in it, he poses a kind of a paradox. He says in every society, whether it's, the feudal dictatorship, military dictatorship, semi-parliamentary system like England, whatever it is, he says power is always in the hands of the governed.
Yes.
Those who are being ruled. Power is always in their hands.
True.
So how come they just don't overthrow the rulers and take things for themselves? He says, well, the secret, he says, always, every society is control of opinion and attitudes.
Yes.
If you can convince people, if the powerful can convince people, you have to stay in your slot. That's where you belong. And that's your role in life. There's nothing to be changed. Then the rulers can control them.
Sure.
And you take a look at the history of revolutions, significant changes. It's when people broke out of that. So not long before Hume, and he may have had this in mind, in England a century before, there was a major conflict between Parliament and the King. The Parliament is basically the bourgeoisie and landowners and so on. It wasn't the general population. And the question is the King above the law? King Charles insisted that he was above the law. The Parliament, led by jurists and others, was saying, no, Magna Carta determined that the king is subject to the law, to the at that time the nobles, in the Parliament. And there was a real major conflict about it. In fact, soon led to a brutal civil war.
Yeah,
but the Parliament stuck it out and compelled the king to sign something conceding that he was not above the law. He was.
I'm actually a little bit surprised. I always thought the royalty was above the law, which is kind of like a dictator. But a monarch, I understand that it's different. I understand there's different definitions, there's different obligations and things of that nature. But historically, the royalty was always above the law. They were the law. And now I understand that because it's a monarchy with a parliament, it's a totally different ballgame. So if it was when there wasn't a parliament, if it was just the royalty, right, then of course they would be above the law. They are the law. Their word is law, right? That's how I always remember it. Anyway, I understand what he's saying, though. This one's almost done.
It was very at that time,
Smart
the king
man.
was regarded as a representative of God, and you didn't fiddle around with God.
See,
It
yeah,
was
see?
his business.
I should just let him talk.
So it was essentially standing up against a kind of divine authority, not our society. That meant something then.
Well, yeah, thank you. I was just going to say that. See, the foundation of most, I don't want to say propaganda. The foundation of most societies is moral and what is, your faith. It establishes the foundation of your society completely. So if you have a king that is chosen by God, that is how he got away with everything, because God chose him. You can't go against him. And people truly believed in God and that he was a divine right. It was a divine king. It was chosen by God, and you wouldn't go against God. Therefore, you don't go against the king. So it worked until and here's the thing, neither here nor there. This is just for conversation's sake. You chip away at the divine right. You chip away at the absolute power of God and people chosen by God. Now, I'm not getting into the whole it was BS, that they just said that they were because it worked and da-da-da-da. A lot of them believed it, by the way. Back in the day, they believed that they were chosen by God. They were told this was just how they were raised. This is who they were. Okay. It is what it is. Neither here nor there. You chip away at that, and you chip away at the ultimate morality. So if your entire society is based on this morality that holds you accountable to God, it is unquestionable, right? So the black and white, the rules are real super easy. This is allowed and this is not, right? There's no wiggle room. But you take away the ultimate eternity consequence of defying God by disagreeing, right? Now, yes, you can get more rights for people. There's a lot of good things, but there's a lot of bad things because now you're making it so that those morals are not as stiff and concrete. Now they're fluid. And if it's fluid about this piece, why isn't it fluid about this piece? So then you have the morality, like let's say sexual morality, of whether, people like having, sex before marriage and things of that nature are now up for question because if anything's fluid, then it's all fluid. You can't pick and choose. It's either or. It's either absolute or it's fluid. There's no, well, for this it is, but for this it's not. Because people are like, that's some bullshit, right? So that's where you start getting that breakdown, which is why a lot of these, in my opinion, why a lot of these countries with these regimes, they stick very, 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 very sincerely hand in hand with religion. Because if you can hold someone's eternity and afterlife over them, you win. Nobody wants to fuck with that, right? I'm just saying.
And to break through that was very difficult, but they did. That led to constitutional parliament, to a parliamentary monarchy, which is different from feudal monarchy.
Okay, I think that was a good video, and he's a very smart guy. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a little bit more modern comparisons, going to talk about kind of like more current mainstream media, because he said it says the youth and mass media, but they weren't talking about mass media. They were talking about just like speaking to the masses, but not in a media format. So I thought it would be a little bit more contemporary, but that's okay. But that's the thing. I don't know. That's what I think, what I said during, I think from what I thought it was going to be about the whole false reality, I do think that people are playing a different game. I think that I did see a comment that said, rich people just want to get richer. I think it's a lot more than that. I sincerely think it's so much more than that. I think that they're playing with different pieces. I think money is not even sincerely even like a thing. It's like when you can't afford to think of something. I'm trying to think of something. You can't afford to have salt, and then someone has a salt mine. Like salt's not a thing for them. They don't care. You know what I mean? It's just not a thing. I don't know. I don't know how to put that. I don't know how to articulate that. I feel like the money, they have got so much. They're so filthy rich. They've generationally accumulated wealth to the point where they're just shitting money. Like that's not even the thing. Once you hit that level of wealth, it's now about power. Once you hit that level of power, it's about control. And once you hit that level, that's when people get evil. Like evil, like dark shit, in my opinion. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed my commentary. I'm going to put the link below to the original video. And if you want to see more stuff like this, or if you have a suggestion, put it below, put it there, put it in the Discord, send me an instant message. And I have no way to do this outro, so have at it.